This is informational, but it also is an item that we are allowing public comment. I realized that I did see some comments with regard to this issue of fur-bearing mammal, and so hopefully we've resolved that in everybody's mind. So at this point, I'll go ahead and have Vice Chairman Rob call the names.
Trish?
Trish Swain, Trail Safe Nevada. Thank you, commissioners. With that language straightened out, I think that we have done a good job here. I'm very pleased that we are able to make that change that has bothered me ever since we started, so I'm very glad we're getting that fixed. And we still do have our slate that is not endless, but we certainly do have our slate of improvements that we would still like to see. But the good news is that we're going to have this other regulation coming along, the trapping methods, and during that discussion with the Trapping Regulation Committee, now that I know it will be vetted the same way this one was, I believe we can address that. So we certainly still feel that we need to talk more about these traps in these waterways and get a little more definition of what we're talking about there. We still need to talk about informing the public where are traps so that the public can be safe. It seems quite reasonable to me that someone will not go if they know there are traps in an area. However, this one sends it on its way with our blessing. We thank you.
Thank you.
Joe?
For the record, Joe Blexley, Nevada Trappers Association. It's been 2 years and 3 months. I'd say let's get it done. The only concern I have is if we change that fur-bearing mammal thing, whether it's going to get done in time so it'll satisfy what the legislature told us to do. Thank you.
Peter Shepard? Rich Sandez?
I'm Rich Sandoz, live in Spring Creek, Nevada. I'm representing myself on this. I am a Nevada Trappers Association member, and I support whatever their proposals are this week, and I won't be here tomorrow. But I do want to point out a couple things, though. Cage traps cost about $1,100 a dozen. Foothold trap costs about $150 a dozen. So when you look at going all cages on trappers, you're talking a way huge expense on that part too. And although I do own cages too, whenever I'm close to property or whatever type stuff. Another thing I want to point out is most larger areas have leash laws. They have dog at large laws. The dogs have to be licensed, and myself, I have 3 hound dogs, well, 3 dogs, and when I went and got my dogs licensed, I was number 300 in Elko County with that, and there's, I don't know how many dogs out there, but I think that whenever somebody's called out for a dog in a trap, I think that the Department of Wildlife should check on, was the dog at large? Was the dog on a leash? Was the dog licensed? Okay, and then it's just like if you're in a car wreck, they ask you, it's not my fault, but they ask me for my license and all this. I can be cited for not having it. I can be found at fault for that. I think the same thing could happen, should happen on these, on a trap. And you've got laws out there that you can't disturb my set. Now I've had dogs in my trap, and I've never complained about it, you know, that their dogs running at large or whatever, you know, but where everything's coming down against trappers on this, maybe we need to look at having citations issued, and I think NDOW should, whenever they're called out on something, they should check all that stuff and cite them for whatever the above is, you know, disturbed set or not on leash or whatever. I guess that's all I have on this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Randall Strobel? Jason James?
I'm Jason James, and I'm here by myself. I'm also a member of the Trappers Association. I back whatever they do. But I won't be here for any further comment tomorrow, but I just got a little bit about myself and to explain why I like things kind of to be left alone, but like I said, I'll back whatever Joel and the guys decide. So I started trapping in Colorado in 1981. The first trap I ever used was a 330 conibear body grip trap. And I set crossovers on the dams to help control flooding and erosion from the beavers. When I moved to Nevada, I found out I could again help this, and I wish I had the pictures of the damage from the beavers. And the half-a-mile radius, I was worried about that when I seen the residents. You have to be a half a mile from any residence. Is last year I spent over 200 days out in the field, and there was times I was on ranch property and I was actually set within that, under that, and I understand it doesn't include private property if I heard correctly. But I was worried about that because I never even trapped on public land last year because I was so busy on taking care of I mainly trapped the rodents, the beavers, muskrats, and these body grip traps are the most humane way I ever found to catch these particular rodents. And the body grip trap falls into, it's just like I see that in the regulations they're writing any animal, you have to have a trap set. Well, are we going to ban the mouse trap in the house? Because it says any animal or any mammal. I mean, that's the same thing. It's the same principle. It's a body grip trap. So that's just a thought. You know, my two boys also have things that they'd like to say, and you know, we're just trying to. It was my dream. I didn't have anyone to teach me this. I'd learned everything from books, reading the history books about. You know, I was born 100 years too late. That's all I can say. You know, and I love the outdoors. I love protecting the wildlife, and there's the biggest thing that I've taught my boys is you never trap everything. If we trap it all and we don't manage our wildlife properly, my grandkids will never get a trap. They'll just have to read about it in history books, and I don't want to see that. I want this passed on, and I want to see things done good. And you know, it's right here in Elko County. I know you guys, people in Clark County don't see it as much because there's, you know, it's a lot drier down there. But up here in Elko County, there's, I mean, Mr. Strobel and myself, my brother and his kids also trap with me. And we worked our butts off last year, and we're having a tough time keeping up with the beavers up here. And like I said, this 330 body grip trap is our #1 method for beavers. And it's quick, it's humane. And I always tell people, myself, if I was going to, if I had to go, I want to go quick. I don't want to suffer. So I take that same respect to my animals. And that's, you know, I appreciate your time, and you know, if any questions, I'd be glad to answer anything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Justin James?
I also have a little script thing that I wrote because I couldn't be here tomorrow. My name is Justin James. I've been trapping in the outdoors since I can remember. I love to be in the outdoors. I always get a tag, whether it's deer, elk, or antelope. I always leave gates how I find them, whether it be open or closed. If we don't trap and control the animal population, then they will invade. Yesterday, June 19th, we rode our four-wheelers down to the gas station. On our way, we seen a coyote that was just across the road from Cory's Market in the trailer section. We stopped and took a picture of him. He didn't even move. We were only 25 yards from him. He just stayed there. My opinion is that if we don't control the numbers, then they will turn to small pets, for example, dogs, cats, goats, etc. Also, I like to use conibears. I like to use them because they kill quick. As many people know, beavers make dams, so some as wide as 100 feet. These dams especially cause problems. For example, they could stop the water flow so that cows and other animals can't get a drink. If we can't trap on dams, then it will make it harder to trap because they also always go on slides. If it is harder to get them, they could kill the livestock because of dehydration. I would like it if everything stayed the same and nothing changed. And thank you for letting me speak, and I hope everything stays the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Quentin James.
My name is Quentin James, and I've been trapping ever since I can remember also. Like my brother said, we've been having many problems out there in Spring Creek with the wildlife. And we've had coyotes come in. We've seen one with the neighbor's cat before. They come right into our neighbor's yard and constantly cause problems. And just recently we had a mountain lion up behind my uncle's house. And he was killing animals out there, pets, goats, whatever. And I would just like to have things stay the same and be able to trap these animals so that way they don't cause major problems within these residents. And they are on public land, and if we just educate people about this before something happens about it, then we wouldn't have so many problems with the animals getting hurt or whatever. And they could teach other people how to identify where they are. Like, we put flagging tape up around our traps, and we could use that and show people where they might be and how to identify that. And I also agree with the cotton bear thing. It's really good to have those because I would rather come up to a dead animal that just died quickly, didn't have to suffer anything, than I would have to come up one that's been sitting in a trap for a couple days or whatever. But either way, and I just like everything to stay the same. And thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Moldy.
I think he wants to be called again, but
What's that?
after Dr. Moley's coming up, and then we'll get you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Don Moldy, Reno. I love the out of doors and protecting wildlife, and I've been opposed to trapping for as long as I can remember, but I digress. Mr. Blakesley reminded me when he mentioned a 2 years and 3 months date that I've been trying to get trapping reform for 35 years, and they had no success until Trish Swain came along, and she's done more in 4 years than I did during the previous 2.5 decades. So I congratulate her on what she did, and I congratulate all of you on the time and energy and patience you've put into this. I think you've come up with a good starting point, and I congratulate you for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have marked.
My name is Randall Stoborough once again, and I introduced myself as a geologist. Yes, I studied geology, but I also studied biology, chemistry, as well as math. And just to elaborate a little bit about what these young men are talking about, when populations reach a certain density and fill up their carrying capacity for their habitat, several things can happen, as they mentioned, disease, and they've got to disperse or die. You know, most of them will die off due to mostly disease. Mange is rampant. It's going crazy up in Sun Valley, Ketchum, Cary, Peekaboo, Jerome, Shoshone. I mean, you can talk to any biologist up there, and you can't even, it's hard to find or see a fox or coyote in that area anymore. Parvo is hitting our area right here, right now. The hantavirus. I mean, we're talking tons and tons of diseases that if we get to overcrowded situations and the carrying capacity is exceeded, these animals are going to take an extreme fall, and they're going to fall flat on the face. And it's well documented, the hare and the lynx cycle in Canada. When the hare population is up, the lynx, they follow behind them. And when they crash, the lynx crash. And in my opinion, if we all want to have and protect our wildlife, we need to have checks and balances. We need to keep these predators in check. We trap beaver. We trap a lot of beaver. In fact, I wish there was more people trapping beaver. It's a serious problem in northern Nevada because we're blessed with so much water. So with that, I want to say thank you to these young men for showing up and being able to speak, and I congratulate you too for standing up finally. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Okay, any further public, Rex, come on in.
Rex Flowers speaking on behalf of myself. I thought originally counties whose population is 100,000 more was going to be defined as Washoe and Clark due to the way our populations in the outlying areas rise and fall according to the gold market. And that is not within this regulation. So I'd like to know if that could be addressed. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional public comment? Come on up.
Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Henry Krinka, speaking for the Nevada Outfitters and Guides Association, and I'd just like to say that we support the recommendations that the Trappers Association has done on both of these last two issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Judy?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Judy Karen for the record. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and I do want to say I support the trappers with their recommendations. I do want to note what a pleasure it is to see both groups working together, but I do have one question that I'm not real clear on and would like to take into consideration. It's the first section. If we change fur-bearing to mammals, the way the language is not clear to me if I could set a mouse trap, honestly. I live out a town on 2 acres, and we do have ground squirrels. I do have mice outside. Outside my garage, we do use mouse traps. We use cage traps for the squirrels, and I'm not sure if that's the intent of what is being proposed to change fur-bearing to mammals. I just want to be able to take care of my property in the area that it is. Thank you very much.
Do you want to?
Well, if we're ready, is that it for public comment?
Yeah, are we done with public comment? I think, because I think we need to address some of these issues that have been brought up by the public.
Rob, if you don't mind. I think largely the mousetrap issue was resolved with the private property exemption, okay? So that was kind of the thought behind that. We've had that in there before, and that was removed primarily because, and we certainly have a regulatory intent here that we've identified as part of this process too. And I know that doesn't help when we get in the middle of things, but I think largely we have that taken care of through some of our exemptions that we've included. The county with a population of 100,000 or more, another good point, Rex. Certainly our intent was to specifically identify. I don't recall talking specifically with the LCB guy about this, but I vaguely remember something coming up about it, and I'm hoping, Rob, was there any discussion on it that you can recall, or did it just get left out?
I know the discussions I recall is from our enforcement perspective, we were the ones that put that in there and wanted to see that in there, so that way the public would receive due notice. Say if, for example, Elko County hit 103,000 and, you know, it was found on, you know, Wikipedia or somewhere there, but it wasn't an official census. So that way everybody knew when the rules change. So that was the intent. And I'm trying to recall, there was discussions, and hopefully you can help me remember here, but there were
obviously struggle with it.
Yeah, there were discussions regarding not doing that and so forth. So to be honest with you, we could have inadvertently left it out, or I don't recall being specifically told to take that out.
We had it in the draft that went to LCB, and it came back without it.
Yeah.
So, and these are things that do happen. The process is frustrating because they do work their legal speak. They did contact us on 2 separate occasions, and I know that Commissioner Drew had answered his question on one aspect, kind of regarding some of the discussions that occurred. When they take this stuff, everybody needs to understand that it largely it's out of our hands. They take these things and they try to word them with our intent in mind. The two major issues that they did, that I do recall them contacting us on, they clearly understood the intent, and we haven't even touched on those. So obviously they worded them the way they felt they needed to for their consistency, and I think they did a good job of capturing what we had talked about. Unfortunately, the fur-bearing mammal thing got put in there, which has caused a little concern, and obviously this county with 100,000 or more, and I don't see a reason why we couldn't put it back in there. They might come back with, there might be something in statutory language we're not aware of that cleans that up, but it's not maybe as clean as we'd like it as part of our administrative code here. So.
Go ahead.
During our discussion, we had the discussion about including Washoe and Clark County multiple times, and LCB probably looked at it, what 226 said, and 226 no place references Washoe or Clark County. Is specific to 100,000, so that's probably how we got to where we are with that, because it never mentions the name of a county, it's population only, so that's probably how we got back to that point.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to say that's why they did it, as opposed to the fur bearer, where I'm comfortable knowing why they did it.
Yeah, my comment on that would be is that LCB's job is to make sure that a regulation doesn't exceed the authority of a statute, and in this case, we have a specific statute that basically talks about the 100,000 population, and so with them making that change, I would be very uncomfortable to change the language of this regulation, because I think they are tracking the actual statute that directs us to, pass this regulation, and so I have a feeling if we change it and send it back to them, they're just going to change it right back. So
that prompts a question.
Anyway, Commissioner Rain.
Something came up prior to the, and we were talking about the 100,000 is a basically definition saying a county is about a county's population be determined by the United States Census. And would it be unreasonable, I mean, a little late at this point maybe, to add in a definition? And we kind of did that before, and then it kind of died.
No, it was included in the draft that went to LCB. It was listed right here.
Can you reread it for us?
Sure. County with it was in the previous section 2, and it says, as used in this section, county with, so in quotations, county with a population of 100,000 or more means Washoe County and Clark County. And that's exactly what was submitted to LCB, and it came back without it, which we couldn't have prevented until we got to this point probably anyway. And that prompts the question, what happens if we do put these in? I mean, we've had this go around before where we're trying to get administrative code correct, where they've brought stuff back and they've changed it so dramatically that we basically had to say, no, this is really, really not what we were trying to do and trying to say, and you changed it so dramatically that we need to start over. And, we're not quite to that extreme now, but certainly, it was certainly something that was an important component, and I don't know why it would be I understand the concern, but to add it back in there, and then, what happens if it gets to them and they deny it? I don't know. Rob, I don't.
What if you had a definition at the end of everything again, referring to the U.S. Census? Is that going to screw it up?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Was Elko County over 100,000 at the 2010 census?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Well, so it's a moot point until 2020 then, right?
Right.
Well, there you go.
Well, but I'd caution with that, because we were trying to tie it into the census aspect, but if we do away with this, there's nothing in there that says where that number is going to come from. So right now, without something being in there, who's going to determine who has 100,000 or more? I mean, somebody would come in and say, well, yeah, and so what are they going to base it on? And Probably the consensus, the census, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, did LCB eliminate two things with their elimination? One is where it says U.S. Census, correct?
No, there was no mention of the census in here.
But it mentions the two counties.
It did mention.
And I suspect, knowing LCB and doing this for 5 years, that by putting those in there, then that really constrains you to those two unless you come back and change it. And so if it's open-ended, whenever a county gets to 100,000, they're in. And so I don't know, if you put U.S. Census in there, that is a definition of when it comes, and like you said, it would be till 2020.
A possible solution here is in section 2, that first paragraph, within congested areas designated by a county with a population of 100,000 or more, just based on the U.S. Census.
That would define it.
Great.
I remember some discussions, first of all, even in our own wildlife statutes, there's a reference to populations of, I think it just recently went up from 400 to 700,000 in defining the county advisory boards, the membership number.
It applies to pretty much anything.
In other words, that the state uses this definition and not only in other wildlife statutes, but in other statutes, in other parts of Nevada revised statutes. And so I don't know how they determine, population for purposes of all these other statutes, but my recollection is that when you look at these other statutes and I assume any regulations that they're based on, that they probably don't mess with, further definitions of census or, specific counties or anything like that. They just leave it, and which begs the question, how do they make that determination? But obviously they do, or at least in my mind, they must, because they've got this particular provision in so many different places. And I guess I'm just getting a little concerned that if we start monkeying with it, that we're going to get it back again.
My gut feeling is, and I'll take some responsibility for this because I had my hands a little bit full and I just didn't have a chance to get hold of anybody, sit down and actually compare them. I knew that we'd had those two issues that we did get addressed, and there obviously we had a couple others. My gut feeling is that if we sat down with them and explained to them why we were putting that in there, that they're certainly going to understand what we're trying to accomplish, and they're either going to have an explanation for why it is the way that it is, or they're going to be okay with us putting the U.S. Census component in, or they're going to be okay with us including that definition that we'd already tried to put in. I can't imagine that they're going to just ignore the discussion. So where does that leave us? Let me ask you a question, Rob. Can you first explain what happens? Let's assume that something leaves here approved. It goes to the legislative committee, is that right? Not of the commission, but of the legislature.
It'll go back to LCB and to legislative commission. My thought here is they struck C, county with the population of 100,000 or more means Washoe and Clark County. They struck that intentionally.
Because it was obvious to them.
Because it was obvious that, no, we aren't going to define counties with population of 100,000 or more. So I think that, if we went back with that, I think we'd have trouble, quite honestly. But if we went back with, the safest way is leave it as is, if we want it to flow through the process. I don't think there's much threat of jeopardizing anything if we just add U.S. Census, based on the U.S. Census. Because I think they're going to view that as very reasonable, and it just says what that 100,000 is based on. That's just Rob's guess.
I've got one more suggestion. It is Friday afternoon, and maybe there's an opportunity to contact the guy that was working on this, and maybe we could, maybe I can go do that with Rob while the meeting continues. We have until tomorrow to decide exactly what we're going to do. Maybe we can get a feel for what the thought, at least the thought behind it, and what would happen if we suggested, modifications to it or wherever we're at. Can we do that?
Yeah, now, this is, we brought it back from public comment, and so we're just discussing it further, and it is an informational item, so we're not going to be taking any action, so you can do that. I'm going to move forward, though.
That's fine.
With the rest of the agenda, and then what we'll do is if you do get an answer, then we'll come back to this agenda item, and you can just report back whatever you found out.
Mr. Chairman, too, just...
Or wait until tomorrow.
Just for you to think about, Don just Googled the census for Elko County. We should have a little drawing here. It's 48,818, so we're a long ways. Pardon? That's 2010. So it's a long ways from 100,000. What's that?
Month and a half.
Find more gold, it'll be, but that's a long ways from 100,000.
Protocol?
Yes, go ahead.
The protocol of this generally is we identify the options for the final day. That's what we do today. So we have identified the options for tomorrow, being possibly striking a fur-bearing mammal and adding in an animal in those two locations, and maybe adding based on the U.S. Census. So anything, I guess our things now is we can't just come up tomorrow with something else. Is there anything else we want to come up with today for a maybe? Because that's our protocol that we've practiced, the Commission's practiced in the past. So it's not just tomorrow we come up with some suggestions.
Not that I'm aware of.
The only other one that I had was in section 1, a person shall not set a trap and strike fur-bearing mammal. And Commissioner Rain hit that in the definition part, but I don't know if we had the set a trap language in
I think he mentioned it in the two places.
Shall not trap an animal and then in two locations.
Right.
Yeah,
And then set a trap in section 1, sub 1.
Section 1, except as otherwise provided in subsection 2, a person shall not trap.
Just adding that.
Oh,
Shall not set a trap.
Put set in, yeah, set a trap.
And strike a fur-bearing
Yeah,
mammal.
yeah. Sure. Set a trap, and then in 3A, an animal, as opposed to a fur-bearing animal. And then in section 3, the end, 3A, the end, same deal. Okay.
Okay. Any further
That's it.
comments from the commission? Discussion? Okay, thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Okay, so you guys are going to go ahead and make an attempt to do that?
We'll just go do that now.